Hi there, this is Josh from Literary Gladiators, and today I'm going to be talking about the 10 best books that I read in 2012. 2012 was a year I was well into college. I was solidified in my major of English. I started working, and I put together a literature club at my college, so I was really beginning to see heavy influence on those standards. But at the same time, I was also reading what I liked and enjoyed. Uh, Thus, it made for a very prosperous reading year. Without further ado, here are the 10 best books that I read in 2012. Number 10 on my list is 75 Short Masterpieces. Stories from the world's literature. There were 75 different writers, and this was put together by Roger Goodman. This is something that I constantly referred to time and time again. I read some short stories in here. Some of them were real standouts. For instance, Shirley Jackson's Charles is something that I read a while back and really enjoyed. A Wicked Boy by Anton Chekhov really stuck out to me. The Heavenly Christmas Tree by Fyodor Dostoevsky. The Boy Who Drew Cats by Lafcadio Hearn. Something that really stuck out in my mind. There were just a great array of writers from across the globe. But this really stood out in my ability to utilize it for the OCC Literature Club, because I would suggest short works and then we'd talk about them slightly. And then in addition to putting meetings together. But in the particular, the Oval Portrait was the particular Edgar Allan Poe work that was in here. That was one that Jay, who was the advisor to the group, really had in mind. But number 9 on my list is It Happened in New Jersey by Fran Capo. And I met Fran Capo at the book fest that they used to have at the Ocean County Library. And I recognized her because she was on The Weakest Link and Dog Eat Dog. And on The Weakest Link, she was on the Record Breakers edition. She had the record, and I think she still does, for fastest talker. She can speak the fastest out of anybody. And they utilized that on an episode of Dog Eat Dog, where somebody had to comprehend a story or a piece that she read, her being the fastest talker in the world. And she signed my book. She said, "Remember, never vote me off a game shop." But there were different things, such as the fact that the Santa Claus that we recognize this day was created by a cartoonist in New Jersey. It speaks about the dinosaur, the oldest dinosaur that they found in Haddonfield, New Jersey. The fact that Hollywood had a presence in New Jersey, and that if Thomas Edison didn't chase him off to California, this could have been the prominent area for filmmaking. But this was just a fascinating book, and I would definitely be inclined to read it time and time again. Number 8 on my list is The Running Man by Stephen King. He wrote this as Richard Bachman, and this has to do with the dystopian game show involving Ben Richards trying to stay away from those that are looking to hunt him down. And if he survives, he wins a major amount of money that will help him be set for life. This was adapted into a 1987 cult classic film with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Ben Richards, but that one was more of a dystopian in the form of a cheesy game show that really reflected a morbid reality show and utilized it to commentate on the sketchy things that take place behind the scenes and how television is often used as a tool for manipulation. And I thought in the film, Richard Dawson as game show host Damon Killian was the best character in the whole film. But this book in itself, even though it's nothing like the film, it carries its own spectacular merit. Number 7 on my list is The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury. And I think that along with Fahrenheit 451, this is his best book. I reread it in 2018, and I will say that I developed an even greater appreciation for it. But back then, I think that the chapter about the taxpayer, paying for this mission but not being able to take part in it, really stuck out to me. But I think in general, this is a really fascinating study of human nature and what would exactly happen in Bradbury's mind if there was a mission to Mars, and how invested people would genuinely be. But this is split into various stories that were published separately, but were ultimately connected with one another in order to make this happen. Some of them in particular appeared in magazines. But ultimately, and I think that it was very well woven together. I think that Bradbury does a fine job as far as that's concerned. Number 6 on my list is Dracula by Bram Stoker. This is a timeless classic, and I think it's one that really stuck out for the way that it established and approached the way that vampires are written. Of course, Vlad the Impaler and the legend behind him is what ultimately put it together, but I think that Dracula does a fine job as far as establishing different components is concerned. And it really isn't like any of the film adaptations. I would say Nosferatu comes closest, even though they changed the names and whatnot, but Nosferatu still establishes its own details as far as its story is concerned. In particular, it's the first one that makes it so that the vampire cannot be exposed to sunlight. Number 5 on my list is The Shrinking Man by Richard Matheson. This may say The Incredible Shrinking Man, but the original title was The Shrinking Man. It became The Incredible Shrinking Man when the film adaptation came out. They started using that title. But this pertains to a man being exposed to radioactive rain and just gradually shrinking. But I think that this was fascinating, but at the same time horrifying, especially if you have a fear of getting smaller. And I think that, and each of the chapters denotes his height and how he just keeps, and what happens as he continues to get smaller and smaller and awaits, wonders what's going to happen, what kind of demise he's going to end up in. But this particular collection also includes Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which was adapted into one of the most recognizable episodes of The Twilight Zone. I did read The Test, and it was a pretty fascinating story. This has Button Button as well, which is also, it was adapted into the film The Box. And Charlie actually put together a video responding to Button Button, because I was originally going to do an overview of Richard Matheson's works in a season 5 discussion, but we didn't have the proper preparation as a whole, and we decided to remove it from the schedule. But Charlie wanted to still do Button Button, which is a work that I've read, as well as some of his other short works. I read I Am Legend, I read What Dreams May Come, and we discussed that on our channel too. Number 4 on my list is The Complete Mouse by Art Spiegelman. I borrowed this originally in its 2 parts from the Ocean County College Library, and I read them in such a short period of time and enjoyed it so much. It was just, I'm so glad that I got this to keep as part of my book collection, because this binds up both of the books. We discussed this twice on our channel, and I think that the use of imagery is what really sticks out, and the fact that Art Spiegelman is writing word for word, and in a way that's straightforward and also very clever in how he does incorporate not just the story, but the process of the storytelling. The one thing that really sticks out is the use of the fact that the Jewish people are depicted as mice, the Germans are depicted as cats, the Poles are depicted as pigs, the French are depicted as frogs, the Americans are depicted as dogs. And it was just an interesting approach that Art Spiegelman took. And Mouse has remained one of my favorite graphic texts of all time. Number 3 on my list for the best books that I read in 2012 is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. I first read this in early 2012, and I immediately was immersed in the series. But by that I mean this book. This really reminded me of The Running Man meets the Vietnam War, because of the way that they draft kids into a battle to the death. And the last ones remaining win, and they get the resources that they need from the government that give them a boost. But I just felt that the concept of this nature was really interesting in the way that it's horrifying in that dystopian kind of way. I read Catching Fire and Mockingjay right after, and I did not like either one. Number 2 on my list is The Girl Who Played with Fire by Stieg Larsson. And this does such a good job following up and continuing the story of Mikael Blomkvist, Lisbeth Salander, and the adventures and that they go into, and the crimes that are taking place around them. It also touches upon the horror. It really expands on the horrifying story that took place between Lisbeth and her guardian, who is a piece of garbage as far as I'm concerned, and as far as anybody else is concerned too. But what really stuck out here is that this is the book that I was reading during Superstorm Sandy, or what took that and the aftermath of what took place during Superstorm Sandy. And thankfully, we did lose power for 8 days, but that was the extent of what happened for us. I know people that lost their homes, which that really was tragic. Fortunately, things did get better, where people were able to get back on the right track. There were things that did prove to be long term, but I think that as a whole we rebounded as far as what happened during that terrible period of time is concerned. And what really made it destructive is the way that it hit and how everything fell in line, which is why it's just categorized as a superstorm rather than a hurricane, despite the fact that it did do a great deal of damage to vulnerable areas. But I read The Girl Who Played with Fire and The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest during this period of time. The Girl Who Played with Fire was a great book. Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest was good, but not as good as the first two. And the best book that I read in 2012 was Aesop's Fables. This collection was translated into English by V.S. Vernon Jones, and this is the Barnes & Noble Classics edition. This is just such a great collection of Aesop's Fables, and it really gave me a great idea of some of the best literature of all time. We all know the stories about The Boy Who Cried Wolf and The Tortoise and the Hare. They go under different titles in here, such as it's The Shepherd's Boy and The Wolf. But then you have a work like The Milkmaid and Her Pail, which you might not recognize it for face value, but you do recognize the moral of don't count your chickens before they hatch. So this is a fantastic illustration of a lot of the expressions and the stories that we can recall today. And I think that this is just so well done, very well illustrated. The stories are often not even a page long. If they're 2 pages, that's long. That's a mammoth of an Aesop fable. But out of any work of ancient literature, thus far, this is my favorite. It was the best thing that I read in 2012, and it's also one of the best books that I read of all time. So this is my stack of the 10 best books that I read in 2012. I want to thank you for tuning into this video. I hope you check out some more videos from this channel. And for now, and as always, I encourage you to keep reading.